You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. There's just so many things that we could discuss about the left completely falling apart here, there, and everywhere. And this comes in many flavors and varieties. We can talk about the media that's utterly collapsing. We can talk about the various numbers of left-wing officials on the representative side, on the Senate side, that are struggling to answer basic questions. And we can talk about Kamala Harris and the future of the party. And trust me, we will. But first and foremost, a few housekeeping items on the news to dig into, kind of get out of the way here. First of all, Dan Bongino, former CIA guy, former Secret Service guy, accepting the role of Deputy Director of the FBI, that Donald Trump made that appointment, as well as a couple of other appointments that are getting ready to move through their Senate confirmation committee processes to the general vote. I would expect that you can see Secretary nominee McMahon also moving forward here pretty soon. That brings us over to the actions of the administration and the administration's movements towards federal employees and internal stuff. So with the year starting to move on, we're out of the first month of the Trump administration. Now we're starting to get into the nitty and the gritty of the policy, things like that. You would expect, well, maybe one who is used to such chaos might expect that the Democrats, seeing now a month of how Trump operates in this administration, seeing how the different secretaries are starting to move, that they would start to center on certain elements that are starting to be maybe a little less popular with the American people. No, not at all. The things that the left is losing their mind about are federal employees being fired and siding with the whining theater majors who were very upset most recently because depending on when you're watching this episode, there's a newest thing for the left to completely lose their marbles over. Most recently, this comes in the flavor of an email that Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency team sent out, in which they said, hey, tell us just, in the next 48 hours, what it is that you did last week. And if you can't read emails, if you're not actually doing anything, if you're not out there, just go ahead and consider this to be a resignation. And the complete collapse, the complete breakdown of those on the left, the theater majors working in the government who cannot fathom being asked what it is they did in the last week, was monumental. So first and foremost, the young lady who went on CNN encapsulating much of the freak out from the employee side was just precious.
First, just tell us about this email and what it was like receiving it and what you all have talked about after getting it.
All right, so first of all, look at the interview subject here. If you're listening, I'll try to describe. Picture any liberal theater major who wears buttons. Yep, that's it. All right, I'll let her describe this traumatic experience of being told to answer an email.
Sure. I got this email Saturday afternoon, about 3 p.m., and I felt absolutely infuriated getting this email with a demand within 48 hours to provide a response on what I did within the last week or face termination. This is clearly an attempt from Elon Musk to harass and bully and intimidate the federal workforce, which is part of his broader plan to gut the federal workforce.
Now, by the way, for those who said, well, you can't just respond to that email. What if you do very classified things and you were sending nuclear secrets or whatever over open emails? I will remind all of y'all, this is what the email says. It's on screen right now, again, for those who are listening. It says, please reply to this email with approximately 5 bullet points of what you accomplished last week and include your manager. So if you're lying, they'll notice. Please, and then this is in bold, do not send any classified information, links, or attachments. Deadline is by midnight Tuesday, Monday at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. This is what she suggests is intimidating her. That's it. This is what's bewildering beyond all belief, intimidating. Oh, this is this is going to harass everybody. What? Answering an email about what it is that you do here is harassing? I come up with a list every day of things that I do as a remote employee from Indiana to my friends and colleagues over in Washington. I send that stuff right in. And then my editing team, the executives of the company, actually know what it is that I'm up to so that then they can forward around, send whatever it is that's relevant to other employees. It's very basic, like normal stuff. You guys do realize that your managers are supposed to be appraised of what it is that you're doing on the job, but the federal workforce, as she said, the horror. So again, the Democrats and the legacy media clutching all of the pearls that they can. By the way, Trump's response to this, while he was meeting with a foreign dignitary, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, that the media has no idea how to stay on topic whatsoever, whensoever. But here is Trump's response, and rightly so, to the incredible pearl clutching.
Benefit from more streamlined communications. There was that email telling employees to give 5 things that they've done last week. Agency has then told people to ignore it.
You're talking about the last email that was sent?
To correct what she said real quick, she said agency heads, she's saying that like a blanket sweep, said not to respond. To clarify, people like Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, she said you don't need to respond because if you're working on like long-term intelligence projects and things with a lot of classified information and that's all you do, then that's, obviously don't respond to that. But if you're in like the Department of Education or Health and Human Services or the National Park Service, yes, you should be responding.
Where he wanted to know what you did this week. You know why he wanted that, by the way? I thought it was great. Because we have people that don't show up to work and nobody even knows if they work for the government. So by asking the question, tell us what you did this week, what he's doing is saying, are you actually working? And then if you don't answer, like you're sort of semi-fired or you're fired, because a lot of people are not answering because they don't even exist.
He means, again, that they're not even working. Again, there is an entire industry around keeping your computer active if you're working on a remote job. Things that move your mouse every once in a while so that your communications app, if you're, in a great company, Slack, if you are suffering constantly Microsoft Teams, it will keep you online so it looks like you're working. Your status will be green. You're working hard. You're doing things. You're important. You're doing the stuff. And it turns out that I shouldn't be paying for you to do nothing and look like you're working. That's not a thing. I'm sorry. That's not going to be something that American people are approving of. And this idea that the Democrats are going to cling to this desperately, that they have Rosa DeLauro, the Democrat from Connecticut, out there whining that all of these government agencies are being cut. And first of all, Rosa DeLauro, for those who are listening and are not watching, she looks, I don't even know how to describe how she looks. It's something entirely new. Imagine a barista at a trendy coffee shop with the colored hair and the glasses that look like Dr. Seuss drew them, and then put it on an old woman who looks like the Mother Goose depiction of the lady that wanted to eat Hansel and Gretel. And that's what Rosa DeLauro looks like. So here's Rosa DeLauro 2 weeks ago whining again about, how could they cut funding to USAID? This ain't gonna work.
This is Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro. As ranking member of the House Appropriations Committee, it is my job to oversee government funding. That includes funding for an agency critical to our national security and humanitarian efforts around the world, the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID. I've long fought to increase funding to reduce hunger and battle disease. USAID saves lives around the world.
All right, so she's, again, the idea behind the USAID and the other federal funding cuts is the left is claiming that these are essential services that are helping the world that are being cut. And then Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency team, as well as subcommittees from Congress, comes forward and says, hey, there's like all of this rot and waste here. Anyone notice this? Anybody got a problem with this? And then the left kind of grumbles and mumbles and then starts whining about people being fired again. All right, radio crew, we'll see you in just a second. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. And it's not just the firing of federal officials who are just like medium level employees on down to the interns being fired. The Democrats are losing their minds over. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, has, along with President Trump, removed the previous Joint Chief of Staff as well as 2 other senior military officials. So Air Force General C.Q. Brown Jr. From the Air Force, he served as I believe a fighter jet pilot. I don't know what it is exactly that he flew, but he flew for quite a long time and was a senior officer. He had quite a few posts that were very in favor of Black Lives Matter and very left-wing political causes, which is probably not what you want from a Joint Chief of Staff. And so Donald Trump and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth then canned him. And by the way, very, very common, has happened for quite some time, that presidents of the United States would go and fire senior officials in the military, including Joint Chiefs of Staff. These kinds of firings have happened in the Biden administration, in the Obama administration, the Bush administration, all the way back through the Truman administration with General Douglas MacArthur. It's a common thing. But the media is losing their mind over it, including a question thrown at Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth today, who responded to this in a way that I think a lot of us want to respond to these kinds of questions.
Mr. Secretary, why did you select an underqualified retired Lieutenant General to be the next chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff? Given
I'm going to choose to reject your unqualified question.
Fantastic. Who's this, this unqualified individual that you're putting in for? Oh, how could you do something so unqualified? And terrible. By the way, the guy that Trump is nominating to replace that position is Air Force Lieutenant General Dan Kane. He's also an accomplished pilot, national security expert. He was, I believe, doing work regarding the CIA over the last couple of years. He is someone who has been he has been crucial in fighting ISIS in the Middle East. And given that the Biden administration gave the Red Sea over to the Houthis, I think it would be kind of nice to have someone with experience in that and not, the horrible withdrawal from Afghanistan or allowing Russia to march through Ukraine because of the international weakness of the United States. Just kind of an idea, throwing it out there that we have individuals with proven service records and not individuals who have failed critically on the national stage. Now, that leaves us with the Democrat future on kind of the more policy side, because there's really not anything special that we're seeing, and that's going to be Kamala Harris, who we'll talk about near the end of the show today. The last crew that the left has is just federal judges going back and forth and then back again on trying to ban Donald Trump from doing anything whatsoever. So Judge Deborah Boardman, the same judge who was one of the few who blocked Trump's birthright citizenship order, she also tried to block the Department of Government Efficiency from reviewing government contracts. She issued an injunction today trying to block the trying to block DOJ from accessing the Department of Education. Not really sure after reading the court documents how anything that she's trying to ban the Trump administration from, and education laws, kind of one of mine, how any of this has to do with keeping individuals from sensitive information. So they're just blocking the president from doing things that he's constitutionally obligated to do. We're going to talk a little bit more about how the media side of the left is losing it here in a second. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. The left is anchorless. I mean, they were rudderless already because they elected Ken, the absolute nothing to him Tim Walz guy from Minnesota, to be the new DNC chair because Tim Walz was such a stellar success in, the last election cycle. And then they, brought out David Hogg to be the DNC vice chair. So they're already rudderless. There's really not any burgeoning leadership. The best that they had, theoretically, being Fetterman. He can't stop voting for stupid things that the American people are not particular fans of. So who do you have? Well, I'll tell you who you have. You have the media. If you don't have a rudder, then you might as well have some anchors, and they're losing all of their anchors. So Joy Reid of The Readout, the lady over on MSNBC who made a living by screaming about how awful white people are. I know that on MSNBC that doesn't exactly narrow it down. Joy Reid has now been canned by MSNBC, and by the way, kind of a brutal fashion. Her show, The Readout, which was not the least rated show on MSNBC, has been cut. I think this week is her last episode. And on a Zoom call that was recovered by townhall.com, she just melted down. And I don't know whether to cringe or laugh because of the type of person that Joy Reid is, but here you go.
My show had value, and that, I'm sorry, that what I was doing had value. And in the end, I'm sorry, I try not to cry on TV. And this is kind of like me on TV, so I apologize. And then it mattered. I see Karen is there, and she's been texting me as well. And so what I will just say is that in the end, thank you. Where I land is that the moment of guilt that I felt, that I went hard on so many issues, whether it was the Black Lives Matter issues of a young baby or a mom or a dad that was killed, or when we opened up people's eyes to the fact that Asian Americans were being targeted, and not just Black folks, or went hard for immigrants who've done nothing but come to this country like my parents did. By the way, I love that accidentally saying the quiet part out loud. She's like, yeah, Black Lives Matter, and then we exposed Asian hate. And like 97% of all crimes against Asian Americans are committed by Black Americans in inner cities, which by the way, for normal people, it's still just an individual that has bad character, regardless of, color, regardless of whatever else. An individual who commits a crime, the crime and the character are the guilt. But for Joy Reid, who thinks that being Black innately makes you a good person, that cuts directly against her narrative. And so she had to and not just Black folks. Like, what does that have to do with anything? Oh, that's right. You think that color has inherent value to a person. And it was this feelings-led style of punditry. And don't get me wrong, look, I'm a pundit, all right? There are individuals on the right, on the left, on the libertarian side of things, I guess on the more authoritarian side of the compass, that are pundits. We get out here, we break down the news, we analyze it, we give you some quips. Sometimes some of the things that we say get a little bit spicy. But what I try to do, and what a lot of good pundits try to do, it's why I'm trying to do it this way, is we'll give you the data, we'll give you the information, and then I'll tell you why it matters, and I'll try to contextualize it. Joy Reid and a lot of pundits on the left will give you feelings-based qualitative data. This is a big thing when I was in education at Indianapolis Public Schools. I would constantly argue with the staff. They would say, students feel things are racist. And I said, okay, is there evidence that what is in the textbook, what is in one of the science textbooks behind me, is there anything in there is racist? And they would say, well, it's that students feel there's not enough representation that makes it racist. I'm like, that's not the same thing. If you have objective information in front of you that suggests something, that is quantitative data. There's a quantity of it. It can be reproduced. It can be objectively examined. Qualitative data is, well, I think that, this just kind of is this way, and therefore I say this makes me happy. And so you'll find a study that says the majority of people find that the DMV is racist. And we interviewed all of these people of color, and that's how the study's written, and they all said that the DMV made them feel like they were racially discriminated against, so therefore the DMV is racist. And the secret of the matter is the DMV sucks no matter where you are, no matter what state you're in. That's always a nightmare. It has nothing to do with what color you are. Like the DMV staff doesn't see, a white blonde girl walking in and go, oh boy, the person we can be nice to. Like, it sucks for everybody. But again, leftist pundits running everything with qualitative data and nothing else of substance. Well, you don't actually have to watch Joy's show because you already know what she's going to say.
It's just like you don't ever have to listen to Jasmine Crockett or Summer Lee talk in Congress, because you already know they're going to get up there, they're going to go white people bad, and then they're going to ramble incoherently for 3 or 4 minutes. Like, I can hear that from the crackhead outside of my local Speedway at about 5 a.m. if he's awake. And that's not something that people are interested in. The reaction to this, by the way, has been fantastic. You have left-leaning pundits, and I can't really say officials because Stacey Abrams can't win an election, but you have like Keith Olbermann saying, it is such a confused, brutal, racist purge at MSNBC. It's like they're being run by Elon Musk. And then you've got Stacey Abrams saying, we've got your back, Joy. Call MSNBC and complain. Now, I really do appreciate a line that MSNBC is apparently super duper ultra incredibly racist or whatever, because they got rid of Joy Reid when the replacement that they have come up with is a panel show. And the panel show it consists of Simone Sanders, a former spokesman to Vice President Kamala Harris, Alicia Menendez, and then Michael Steele, who's a former chair of the RNC. 2 black people and a Hispanic person. I don't know how to tell you this, but that's not a racial, culling at all. In fact, you now have more people of color working there than did before. But I do think this is funny that after Scott Jennings on CNN has made such a kerfluffle on panel shows, and that's what's driving a lot of CNN's ratings right now, I think that MSNBC is trying to mimic the panel show a little bit here, because God knows The View is never going to moderate. So that brings us to Simone Sanders. Reminder, they replaced Joy Reid somehow with a more awful person. Here you go. Here's Simone Sanders.
That good stuff that Elon Musk was tweeting about. However, please don't come for Americans. And I would like, let's be very clear, I would like white Americans to stand up. This is your calling card, honey. Where's your banner? Because they coming for you. They said y'all white and lazy. That's crazy.
Now, by the way, she's also, told every time she's on camera, it's just white people need to do this, white people need to do that. Okay, Joy Reid 2.0, okie dokie. Good luck, MSNBC. I'm sure that'll pull big numbers. Speaking of The View, actually, I should point out that Sonny Austin was on The View telling everyone today, because, when you think of The View, you think of great Christian virtue. Apparently opposing wokeness, like racial and sexual discrimination. Apparently that's ungodly or something.
I thought about the conversations you and I have had, Whoopi, so many times about the co-opting of the word woke. And the fact that the right somehow has made it a dirty word. To be woke is a word that came out of the African-American community, and it was about acknowledging social justice inequities, acknowledging people suffering.
By the way, I do want to point out one of the things that's funniest about that is after an entire campaign of claiming that woke didn't mean anything, after the right said, you're making fighting systemic ghosts your entire personality. And you're saying that this systemic racism and sexism and homophobia and whatever other adjectives you want to put in, you're making that all of it. And that's a problem because it's objectively not true. And so they tried the whole woke isn't even a thing. Now we're on the other side of the election, and now they're going to double down. Just right down the lane, keep going, right through the whatever woke theme park they've got going on. We'll catch the radio crew here in a second. We're going to talk to a very special guest over on the show about some great legislation that's coming forward about protecting kids from trafficking. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal. All right, last little bit of media news this evening that I find just precious. Lester Holt is also out. So Lester Holt, host of NBC Nightly News. I used to really admire Lester Holt. Not like admire him like, anytime I was like, Lester. I liked seeing Lester on TV as a kid. He was a journalist and a broadcaster that I always thought had it together. And as someone who, studied a lot of kind of late 90s and early aughts history and the end of the 90s, ending on 9/11, and the news coverage that happened over the next 3 to 6 years being crucial to how the United States would enter its next era, I always, for a time, I always admired how Lester Holt tried to deliver the news. And then the second Obama administration happened, and the dude went wacko loopy Fruit Loops. And Lester Holt has to be one of the worst offenders of using twisted terminology in order to convey a political opinion while trying, or I should say, pretending to sound unbiased. So the idea is that you would have, for example, the giving of hormonal medications to minors who want to change their gender. And so these hormonal treatments, these hormonal medications, which we do not have any idea the long-term effects of them, they're extremely carcinogenic in older women, so much so that before a woman takes hormonal menopause treatments, she has to be told that you've got like at least a 4 times greater risk of cancer in the reproductive organs, because humans do not really understand how the endocrine system works entirely. It's a very complex system. So what the left does is when they're reporting in the news, they don't actually say, well, untested hormonal treatments for children. They'll say gender affirming care. And it makes it sound really wonderful. They don't say abortion. Now they say reproductive care and reproductive rights. And Lester Holt is one of the pioneers of this kind of nonsense. And he would use the left's written terminology for any word whatsoever, even if it turned out that that was completely foolish as a way to describe whatever it was he was reporting on. And he was one of the architects of kind of the modern broadcasting ethos that crumbled the legacy media. So it's unclear why it is that he's stepping down at NBC Nightly News. I'm saying, I know there's some kind of mixed feelings on this over on the broadcasting side of the community, which, again, you guys don't care about. Why would you? But at least as far as I'm concerned, Lester Holt's consistent manipulation of terminology to push a political narrative was exceptionally frustrating, and him being off the air is certainly not a bad thing. One last little bit of media news here before we head over to this particular interview. The way that the media is continually covering Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency, wherein you have a series of statistics, a series of things that are reported by the Department of Government Efficiency, and then when a judge comes in and says, all right, you're blocked, the media has swung in. We've seen this with USA Today. We've seen this with the Associated Press. We've seen this over with, I think it would be Bloomberg would be the one, but I might have that last one wrong. Left-leaning outlets that have suggested that you need Senate confirmation hearing appointees in order to view data at the federal government level. And that's just not true at all. And until the media starts reporting on Elon Musk and Doge correctly, which is very possible to actually report on those things objectively, they're not even going to begin to rebuild their own credibility. So the left really is anchorless. All right, we're going to hop away for a quick second, come back and talk to Angela Stanton-King. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Closing. Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. It's a joy to be joined by Angela Stanton-King. She's a great author. That's where I know her from. Some of you may follow her over on Instagram. She's got a fantastic mind, and she's especially cognizant, especially articulate when it comes to pro-life issues and actually discussing some of the laws, policies, and just all of it when it comes to great motherhood, the American health movement, all other kinds of stuff. Ms. Stanton-King, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tony. It's awesome to be on the show with you today.
Now, I know that we were planning on talking a little bit about the Naziah Harris law. Can you give us a little bit of background on this story? It's a really tragic situation.
It is a really tragic story, and this story actually needs no days off and all hands on. Naziah Harris was a young 13-year-old girl out of Detroit, Michigan, who was learned to be sexually abused by a family member. It was her aunt's husband, and he had been abusing her ever since she was a very young girl. They found out she was pregnant at around the age of 13, and then all of a sudden she disappeared. And now they're having a murder trial saying that her and the baby both were unalived because she refused to have an abortion. And so we're fighting for this young child. We have a change petitioned out on unchange.org, and we're asking the community to help us pass the Naziah Harris law. And this law basically states that if there is an adult in the home that is aware of any type of physical or sexual abuse of a child and that they don't report it, that they too will be held accountable by law. It's time that we stand up for the most vulnerable. That's our children, that's our babies. So we need the support of our entire community. Head over to change.org. Look up the Naziah Harris law. Let's spread the word and let's make a difference.
Well, first of all, let's go one step ahead further. You can find the link to the change.org establish the Naziah Harris protection law against witness sexual assaults. That link is down in the description. We're going to make sure that's on the Chiron as well for those who are watching on TV and there's not a description. So now that that is in the description, hopefully a lot of our audience is going to go over and put a little bit of weight behind that. Tell us about the momentum right now in cases where we're seeing these horrible acts that are brought forward against children. It seems like Americans are paying a lot closer attention to these kind of situations.
It does seem like that because I think that, over the last 4 years, we have seen people blow the whistle on human trafficking and things that's happening to children right here in America. And we're seeing a lot of more people speak up and a lot of more people speak out. Not only that, most of us all know that one friend or family member that experienced this in their childhood and were forced into silence because nobody said anything. They swept it under the rug in the family and they swept it under the rug in the church. And it's gotten so bad that we're now seeing some agendas in our government that are still sweeping things under the rug when it comes to children. So, silence is violence. Mm-hmm. And it's time that we all speak up and speak out. Children cannot protect themselves. So the momentum, listen, we need to have all the momentum that it is in this world when it comes to protecting our children, especially after noticing what has happened with our border being wide open. We're hearing about the Lakeland Riley. We're hearing about all of these cases. What are we going to do to make sure that our children are safe?
There's this really silly and stupid idea that, we need to protect the family, we need to protect the institution so that we start sweeping things under the rug, and that's the collective we as a societal we. And this idea that you can't really condemn individuals and broadcast the awful things that they have done because it might hurt the family, it might hurt the church, and that's ridiculous. If God can build a church, his church can withstand someone in there acting gross and awful. That's not going to damage God because this individual did these terrible things, and sweeping things under the rug is only going to hurt additional victims.
That is so true, because what happens is you victimize you make the predator, you empower him, because what happens is he now is the person that's protected and the victim becomes the predator. So you end up giving this predator more power because he feels as though he can victimize the next person, the next person, the next person, because no one is going to say anything. And it's just time for America to put an end to this. This isn't a new story, unfortunately. It's a new name, but it's an old story. How often have we heard these stories about children being abused, children losing their lives at the hands of adults, and other parents being around and adults being around that knew about it, but we were absolutely negligent. So it's just time to sound the alarm. We need to protect our children.
I think that also comes with empowering parents when things don't pass the sniff test. There's this, it'll be fine aspect of our society that has caused a lot of abuse and pain that needs to be stopped. If there's a mom, if there's a dad who smells something a little off, something's not quite right, we shouldn't immediately put up barriers and say, whoa, you're wrong for smelling something a little weird here. We should be empowering parents to say, why do you feel that way? And maybe we should talk to the individual. Why is there something here that smells funky? Something seems off. Because better to be a little overprotective than, God forbid, have a situation like Naziah Harris and what she was forced to go through.
And that's so right. And it's just time for us to hone in on our parental rights as well. Like, stop being silent when you're seeing your parental rights being snatched away right out from up under you. In this day and age, we are seeing laws being passed saying that a parent doesn't have a right to their child's medical records, or that a parent doesn't have a right to know how their child is identifying at school. If you're not aware of what's going on with your child, then how are you going to be able to help them, counsel them, or anything like that?
Let's dig into that. that for a second, because think of how many times we see a child who goes to the doctor because of some type of a concern over a pregnancy or over a concern of maybe a sexually transmitted disease or something like that, that through a school health program, if that's kept from the parents, how is the parent going to be able to say, you know what, that is a yellow flag or a red flag of sexual abuse? Obviously, when you're talking about a pregnancy and, preteen or teen years, but also if a child is identifying as something else at school, those types of mental illnesses are also yellow and red flags of sexual abuse. If the parents don't know that, how can they put the flags together and recognize a pattern?
That is so true, because the thing about it is, children of certain age shouldn't even be thinking about sex. They shouldn't be thinking about sexual preference. They should be focused on education, enjoying life, none of the things that makes us grown adults. So it's just time for the people and the parents to take our power back. There's no way we're going to sit back and let a bunch of people, and excuse me, I hope I'm not being too frank, but most of them are parentless, making decisions about what we should do, how we should raise our children, how we should teach our children, and also sexualizing our children in the process, right? Mm-hmm. Let's take back our power. Let's protect all American children. Let's make sure we don't have another Naziah Harris story. And let's support places like Auntie Angie's House, where we empower mothers and babies and children to live their best full lives, right? Without fear, without worry that they're going to become victims to an education system or to a society that does not protect them.
I think that, first of all, if you're coming to this show and expecting me to push back on your being frank, you found the wrong show.
Okay.
Be as frank as you like. That's what we've needed. And that's one of the reasons that I'm encouraged to see you're acting in the role of as a senior advisor to Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Everyone in the media likes to focus about, oh, it's terrible, he's talking about vaccines. Oh, it's terrible, he's talking about this aspect of the food industry. If all Kennedy does in his role is draw additional attention to the safety of children and to the importance of recognizing the signs of sexual assault and sexual grooming, that will be a success in this administration for the hundreds of thousands of parents around this country who have seen far too much in the last couple of years.
That is so true. And it's so awesome that you would bring up the word vaccines, because I sat in that Senate hearing right behind RFK, and I watched the constant go back and forth between him and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. But Senator Ron Paul, he said something that was so important and it made so much sense. He says, hey, we're not saying we're against vaccines, but you want me to give my newborn a hepatitis B vaccine on day one, and it's only transmitted through sex. What I'm saying is, why does the baby have to have it on day one? So listen, we have questions. As parents, we should have concerns. We ought to be able to look into things that we don't believe are best for our children without it being so political. That's one of the things I loved about working with RFK, because before I worked with Trump on criminal justice, and now I'm working with RFK on making America healthy again. And RFK is really the glue that brings us together in the center, because whether you're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, whatever you want to call yourself, we all want to be healthy. We all want our children healthy. We all want clean water. We all want clean air. What RFK is doing shouldn't even be political. I'll say it again. It's just the right thing to do.
All right, I got about a minute here left, and I just want you to take it and swing for the rafters as hard as you can here. In the next couple of years, what are you hoping to see accomplished in this country? Obviously, we've talked about the specific law about Naziah Harris. What do you want to see brought forward into the American society that's a major change over the last couple of decades?
Well, one of the things that I want to see is unity. I think that RFK and Trump coming together was the perfect representation of that. It's time that we all put people over party and stop doing so much fighting and be solution-based. So I love to see unity. I love to see us coming together to work for what's best for America, since we're all here together. I also like to see some new criminal justice reforms. Here's the truth. President Donald J. Trump won this election being convicted of a felony. Should there be some reforms in place? If a nonviolent offender has served their time, been released from prison 20 years later, should they still be walking around labeled as a felon? Should their record be clean and clear the moment that they pay their debt to society? Cannabis reforms. They have marijuana legal in just about every state, but we still have people serving life sentences in the states that are now making money off of the same drug. That's one thing. And then the maternal health crisis. All of us are here because our mothers gave birth to us. So if there is a maternal health crisis, then that should be something that has all of our attention, because that is an attack against life. In Georgia, we are number one for the infant mortality death rate. Something has to be done about that. So I'm looking to see this administration eradicate the maternal health crisis, stop funding Planned Parenthood, start funding pregnancy resource centers like Auntie Angie's house. Let's focus on mental health, spiritual health, unity. Let's give America back to God and take our country back.
Every time I hear you talk about things like this, I can't help but be encouraged, because the passion that comes from the work that you're doing is going to bring a lot of things into, just by widening the Overton window, the general conversation of this country, where we can actually start to bring things forward. Angela Stanton-King, thank you so much for spending a couple of minutes with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tony. Bye, everyone.
We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
So, we've talked about the present state of the left, and we've discussed the joys of the left-leaning politicians who, right now in Congress, really only have yelling about the agencies and Elon Musk and Doge as though that's going to resonate with people. Oh, how I want to share what I cannot share with you just yet. There is an embargoed report that I got eyes on today that I will be leading off with tomorrow evening, that just shows that it sounds like the public is not too against the cutting of federal waste and spending. So until then, in the meantime, if the legacy media is collapsing, then what's the future look like? What do we see after midterms in regard to the next presidential election, right? Clearly, the Kamala Harris approach, an echoing of the Hillary Clinton approach, didn't work. So what's the plan? Well, according to Newsweek, the early data shows that Kamala Harris is heavily favored to be the next presidential candidate for the Democrats. 36% supporting. Other polls put her anywhere between 29% and 42% as the favored candidate. Now, you can say that part of this is because there's just something about the empty bench that the Democrats currently have that consists of Pete Buttigieg, who is embarrassing himself in Michigan. You have J.B. Pritzker, who's busy trying to set the world record on obese politicians over in Illinois. And then you've got mayors like Brandon Johnson of Chicago. And all of the blue mayors are just having a time. So you had LA Mayor Karen Bass, who decided to tell the country that she had no idea she wasn't supposed to go to Africa right in the middle of Los Angeles burning down. Or my personal favorite, Brandon Johnson of Chicago, whose current favorability rating, according to Politico, Brandon Johnson's favorability rating is 6.6%. That is the lowest rating of a mayor anywhere at any time I've ever heard of whatsoever. That is an incredibly bad number, especially given that it's Chicago and five of that 6.6% was probably just Mayor Brandon Johnson's team clicking, I promise I really, really like him, like on the survey. So that's really, really rough. So Kamala Harris, all right, that's who they've got. How's she doing? Is she, grown at all? Has she, between Ron DeSantis, so I got to see Ron DeSantis speak at I think the very first Moms for Liberty conference, that was kind of their national annual thing down in Florida. He got up to speak and it was a little bit rough. And I remember telling someone, I like the guy, but he needs to work on his public speaking a little bit. And then he grew. And by the time that we got around to this next election, DeSantis could get out there and he could hit the stump pretty well. Still not the best thing I've ever seen, but it was a lot better. You can grow. You can get some public speaking ability out there. You can get better at the job. So Kamala Harris, has she gotten any better? Well, today Kamala Harris took a little bit of a tour around the Pacific Palisades and the wildfire damage, and her description of the event, bless her heart.
What goes through your mind when you see this? You're here, you're now seeing it up close.
It's not only seeing it, Alex, you can smell it. You can feel it, right? So it's seeing it with our eyes, and many people have seen it. You all are covering it. But to literally be on the ground here, you can smell the smoke that was here. You can feel the toxicity, frankly, of the environment. You can feel the energy of all of the folks who are still here on the ground.
I mean, there you go. It's the smell. I didn't think we would get to hear the "it's the smell" speech from Agent Smith in The Matrix from Kamala Harris. Just precious, just wonderful. What a time to be alive. But it gets better because Kamala Harris, like every other Democrat politician, just gets awards for breathing. And Kamala Harris was given the Chairman's Award by the NAACP over the weekend. And if you can believe it, her acceptance speech is somehow worse.
This chapter will be written not simply by whoever occupies the Oval Office, nor by the wealthiest among us. The American story will be written by you, written by us, by we the people.
I did like the pronouns there. Written by you, by he, by she, by Zim, by Zer, by train, in a box, in a tree, with a goat. The American voice will write. And she's doing two things for those who are listening you didn't quite get to see. First of all, she's wearing like 4 black suits at the same time. I'm sorry, just for those on the live stream, I'll bring this up and I'll pause it.
This chapter.
She's wearing multiple black suits. So it looks like she's going to a French costume party, a 1970s game show host convention, and a funeral all at the same time. It's really incredible. So I'm glad that the dressing habits of Karine Jean-Pierre live on. Number 2, she's like bringing it in repeatedly. So look, everybody's got little mannerisms when they talk. I take off my glasses way too much. All right. There are things that people do. Okay. Kamala Harris is constantly just bringing it in. Like if you can imagine what someone's hands would be doing if they were trying to squash a watermelon between their thighs, they were just like, huh, huh. Like that's Kamala Harris. That's what she's currently attempting to do, like through the whole speech. So as for being unburdened by what's been, the constipation is clearly not one of them. And I say that because the left is really going to have to put themselves together somewhere, somehow. The bar is so low. I'm considering running for a Democrat office because at this point, I think that in my spare time, while goofing off with all of you, I might be able to pull office just by the sheer nature of the fact that I can put sentences together. If not that, then you can always go work for MSNBC in that revolving door. So, I mean, 6.6 favorability rating with Brandon Johnson. There's one other little bit of a tease that I will share for tomorrow. The University of California, Berkeley has been participating in some dodgy stuff. And just like Northwestern University, as far as Chicago is concerned, there are many of these left-leaning institutions that believed that as long as the Department of Education and the Biden administration were on their side, that they could just get away with whatever they wanted, whenever, and that no one would ever touch them, period. And now in the Trump administration, it appears that the Department of Education, and more importantly, the committees in Congress, are starting to get a little bit annoyed. They're starting to be a little bit annoyed at what? Well, universities violating federal law, specifically the Clery Act of 1990. So, to remind you, the Clery Act was a result of a student's murder in which the university did not place the assault and murder of Miss Clery on the police docket. They tried to sweep away the murder under the rug, and they didn't say, hey, there are crimes that happen here on campus. So the Clery Act requires universities to report reported crimes and verified, charged, convicted, dealt with crimes on campus to the public through a university blotter, which is basically a place where police departments put what crimes were responded to, what was reported, etc. So during the Hamas protests, in which all of the Queers for Palestine individuals with a combined IQ of 3.5 were rioting on university campuses like the little privileged theater baristas they were and are, they committed a couple of crimes, including, like on Northwestern University's campus, crimes like assault and battery, crimes also over in many other colleges around the country, and then university police didn't report some of these crimes because it would look really, really bad for the university if, you're thinking about where you're going to send your child and there's a bunch of like violent Hamasniks running free, galloping around campus. And, I don't want to spoil too much, but we've caught just a few more yet again, because nothing makes me happier, nothing puts a smile on my face as a former educator than watching all of those individuals on the far left who thought they would get away with flagrant violation of federal law find out that administrations change from day to day, and Congress is not as quiet and relaxed as it once was. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. Good to be with you as always. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast, nationally syndicated on the Daily Signal, first on 93 WIBC. Take care.